For those of you all who signed up for this thing a few months ago, hoping to hear Ms. Jackson speak as keynote, I'm not her, unfortunately. She's done, unfortunately we lost her to that other agency that has something to do, probably almost as important as water, keeping your air conditioner going. So she went to the PUC, she filled out that last position there. We're gonna miss her a lot. I mean, she was our road warrior. We've been trying to fill her spots, her engagements and all her obligations, and it's taken the whole agency to do so. So she did a lot. Like I said, I'm Jeff Walker. Thank you for that introduction, Leah. I've never been a keynote before, so I had to figure out what the heck a keynote is. I figured out very fast, and for y'all's benefit, it's not music, because I can barely play guitar, and you don't want to hear that. Obviously, it's not keys and locks. So that one picture on the bottom there is actually my desk. That's kind of how I keep track of things, by keynotes, right? None of those were right. So in reality, as you probably already know, keynotes is supposed to set the tone for things going forward. Leah did not have final approval on this, so if it fails, it's not on her. So to me, the keynote is, in dealing with Texas is big. Texas is huge. It's bigger than most of Europe. It's almost 2 times the size of California, and a lot better things than California. It has the 13th highest gross domestic product in the world. Not in the nation, in the world. The Texas Triangle, Dallas to Fort Worth, to Austin, to San Antonio, to Houston, is 21 million of the 29 million people in Texas. Over 70% of the people live in that triangle. It takes most people 11 hours to drive from east to west and 13 hours to drive north to south. Some of us it takes a little less. Some of us it takes a little more. We do not have normal truck stops. We have Buc-ee's, largest convenience store in the world. So with bigness comes big needs, right? The state's population is projected to grow 70% in the next 50 years, from 29 million to over 50 million. And I guarantee nobody's bringing water with them. With population growth comes water needs. Just about all of our categories of demand are projected to stay level here. If you look at the bottom left, projected demand for everything except agriculture and municipal stay about the same because it's more efficient. But with population growth, we've got a lot more needs there. In irrigation, the panel before talked about sustainability. Ogallala is not being pumped sustainable, so that water's going to drop. Less people can afford to pump it. So to maintain this Texas miracle, we've got to come up with some things. So that's why the State Water Plan is designed what it do. The most recent 2022 State Water Plan identifies $80 billion worth of water management strategies, $80 billion worth of needs for water management strategies, 5,800 strategies, 2,400 actual infrastructure projects. And if you see our existing surface water, stays about the same. It's not really growing. Groundwater is actually declining. So how are we going to meet some of those needs? All it takes is money, right? Like I said, $80 billion. That's what we say we need to implement the strategies to meet the needs for Texas in 50 years from now. And that's a lot of money in anybody's book. One thing I'm very proud of, that the Water Development Board has already committed $9 billion worth of funding for those projects. Besides that fact, we're also ratting 20 more million people. What else is driving that $80 billion? We talked about it before, drought. It's summer in Texas, right? So it's hot. It always seems better, drought seems to be on everybody's minds. Some of us in this room are experienced, so this is not our first drought, nor will it be our last drought. It's dry in Texas. Let's face it, it gets that way every year. Just like El Paso said, it's always a drought in El Paso. Make no mistake, I'm not discounting the issues with drought. It causes a lot of economic hardships for everybody. Lack of recreation, livelihood for Texans. Drought is bad for nearly everybody. So that's why the Water Development Board was created in the first place, to lead the state's efforts in ensuring a secure water future for the state of Texas and its citizens. So many of y'all know about the hydrologic cycle, right? Water evaporates, goes to clouds, it rains, goes down to groundwater, surface water, goes back to evaporation. It's a big cycle. There's also a hydroillogical cycle, where you've got, where there's rain, there's apathy, then drought comes, awareness, then concern, then panic, then it rains, we start over again. I don't know where we are right now, but it depends where you are in the state. Some people say, oh, it rained last week or 2 weeks ago, we're out of drought. No, we're not. So we also hear a lot of comparisons between the drought now and the 2011. So as we know, drought's a slow train wreck, but it can happen fairly quickly. This is 2022, so it should be, so September 21 last year, no drought, hardly any. January, still not bad. August of last week, some pretty bad drought. Not as bad as it was 2 weeks ago, but still pretty bad. How do we compare to 2011? Much worse, right? As you can see, we're a long way from 2011, thank goodness. The patterns are very similar because it happened within a year, but the whole state was an exceptional drought. One of the problems is, though, what people don't realize is that between 2011 and now, there are 4 million more Texans. Take that. In 10 years, there are 4 million more Texans. And like I said, again, nobody brought water with them. So what are we doing? How's our storage doing? How's the conservation doing? This is those two lines, the dark one and the red one there, are 2011 and 2022. Look pretty similar, don't they? But we've got 4 more million people there. Hopefully that does not continue to go the same way. We are building new reservoirs. We're building the first 2 in 30 years. Lake Bodark and Lake Ralph Hall. Bodark's going to supply enough water to, let's see, it's 80, where is it here? Enough water for 80, I can't read my numbers here, 580,000 people. The problem is that service area is growing by more than 50,000 per year. So if you do the math pretty quick, that's about 10 years worth of reservoir. So it took 30 years to build it, it's going to be tapped out in 10 years. Much of the state depends on groundwater, as y'all well know. It's very important to consider how our aquifers are doing. On this slide, we're looking at data average from about 200 of our recorder wells, the 9 major aquifers. The first number under the aquifer is the change between June of this year and July of this year. The second number is a change from July of 21 to July of this year. You know, relative to the previous year, all but the Hueco and the Ogallala are trending down. Not a good start. So I mentioned that there are 2,400 water infrastructure projects for $80 billion. This shows how much need is being met by the different strategies. The largest source there is other surface water. What the heck does that mean? What is other surface water? That means hooking up to existing surface water that's not being used right now. You remember the slide a while back, it showed surface water availability versus surface water use. There's a big delta there. This is tapping into that. For example, Dallas has owned Lake Palestine, water rights in Lake Palestine forever. They're just now going to be tapping into that with the integrated pipeline, the 158-mile pipeline. About a $2 billion project. Same goes for groundwater. Since this conference is on groundwater, let's focus on that. This table shows the volumes of water by strategy. The highlighted ones here are the strategies that are pretty much groundwater. If you combine them all together, there's roughly an additional 1 million acre-feet of groundwater needed to meet the future needs. This compares to about 300,000 additional acre-feet needed right now to meet the demands during a drought record. And like you said, it's a graph that we showed a while ago. Groundwater availability and supply is declining. And this map kind of shows where the major decline are. The red is not good. Red is not good. So while there's an expected decline in availability, there is still groundwater available for the future. One problem is that most availability is in areas where there's not population centers, or it's limited by regulatory or management strategies to manage subsidence. So So what are we going to do? Are there any magic bullets for groundwater? Maybe so. There's an ocean of brackish groundwater under Texas. Scott mentioned a while ago the ocean of groundwater under El Paso. It's estimated 2.5 billion acre feet. That's enough to meet the total water needs of Texas in 2070 for 140 years. Billion is a lot. So what's keeping Texas from using this huge source of water? Actually, we are using it now. So there are nearly 50 brackish desal plants operating in Texas right now, and more on the way. Some of them are surface water, but most are using brackish groundwater. 95,000 acre feet is a start, but there's a lot more water available. So what's holding us back? So several things. Right now, it's primarily cost of alternative supplies. Alternative supplies are cheaper. There's some discharge issues and the lack of understanding of where the brackish water is. So that's where our BRACS program comes in. BRACS is the effort to figure out what is there, where it is, how much is it, and how brackish is it. So the map on the left shows the completed studies to date. These are currently underway. On the right are the Hill Country Trinity Aquifer, Edwards Plateau, and the Upper Coastal Plains are in the early stages. Completion of these should be early mid-22. So we started BRACS back in 2009, and in 2015, the legislature asked us to designate production zones. So what's a production zone? It's basically where the sweet spot is for brackish groundwater. Where there's not a threat of injection wells, or the water could be produced over 30 to 50 years without significant impact to the water availability or quality. We had to develop these zones very quickly, so by design they were very conservative. We set a 15-mile buffer zone away from any injection well. And so the result of that, there was not a lot of production zones designated, or they were pretty small. If anybody remembers the map before, there's a lot more brackish aquifers, so these production zones are pretty tight, pretty small. So we contracted to develop procedures and tools to scientifically designate production zones rather than just an arbitrary 15-mile buffer. That contract's complete. It's not online yet, not usable because we have some contracting issues, but hopefully soon. So hopefully that'll give everybody an idea. Municipal people or anybody who wants to use brackish water, where the water is, what the quality is, and how can use it. So again, everything is big in Texas, right? Big population, big economy, big water needs. The same goes for my agency. We have some pretty big needs to enable us to do our mission. When you're charged with leading the state's efforts to ensure a secure water future for Texas, it's a pretty big task. We do it through what we call 3 pillars: the science, the planning, and the financing. We were created to do water supply planning and financing in 1957. The science came a little later, and most recently we were also tasked to do a statewide flood plan. To cover the whole state and do it well takes people and money. We've been pretty busy over the last few years, so we're kind of been the victims of our own success. The reward of good work is more work. And over the last 5 years, our workload has increased exponentially. We've been averaging about $2 billion worth of project funding over the last 3 years. On top of that, we've been delivering funds and contracts for new flood planning and mapping efforts. That equates to more projects and more contracts. And as the graph shows, we experienced exponential increases in workload, but not the labor. In fact, the only labor increase there on that bottom graph is the people we got to do the flood planning and mapping. And we're finding even that was a little short. We recently submitted our legislative appropriation request. For those of you who don't follow state budgeting, I don't blame you, but you're missing out on some fun times. I'll say it facetiously, but it's pretty important and it affects a lot of you in this room. The LBB, Legislative Budget Board, provides the agencies with a base budget for the upcoming biennium. That's what we have to start with. If the agency is fine with that base budget, we just move along. We don't ask for anything else. We don't go over our base numbers. However, if you need more money, you have to ask for an exceptional item request. Now, it looks like we got a lot of money in science and data there, kind of skewed. Reality is a lot of that's for our our FEMA grants that go through flood for mitigation projects. So there's about 100 million of that is not related to science and data. It's passed through. So it's kind of in the line with everything else. So if you're not satisfied with your base budget, like I said, you do an exceptional item request. It's like asking for an increase in your allowance. Like I mentioned earlier, we have been the victims of our own success, and we need some relief. But we also recognize there are a lot more needs within the state for science, planning, and projects. So we have a huge request. We're asking for a considerable increase in our allowance. We're asking for $728 million over our base. That's a lot of money. Before you think that we've lost our minds and are trying to grow an empire here, I want to point out that of that $728 million, $665 million is for projects that go to users in the state, not administration. We're asking for about $63 million in administration for the agency. And to further break that down, $17 million of that is for our flood and flood mapping people who are now on a one-time source of funds. So we're asking for them to be moved to GR. Because if we don't move them to GR, that money runs out, we don't have money to pay them. So it looks like a lot of money, but it's really for projects and people of the state of Texas. A little more deeper dive on some of the exceptional items that may be of interest to y'all. We have multiple viewers, and with our data enhancement and modernization. We have multiple viewers, databases, applications that have been created over the years. We need to get those synced and speaking to one another, and talk the same language so we can provide better service to all y'all. We are also asking for funds to continue our spring flow monitoring and to expand our recorder well services and our data collection. Finally, we are asking for funds to support and expand the Texas Mesonet and incorporate the state ET network. We are also asking for funds for project management and risk mitigation. Like I said, we're doing $2 billion worth of projects a year. That takes a lot of people to manage those projects. So we're asking for $15.9 million for people, a project management system, contract management. We've expanded our contracts from 200 to 700. That's a lot of contracts to manage. IT enhancements. I wake up every morning hoping we haven't got hacked. I'm sure some of y'all do too. And then just staff resources. We need more people to do what we're doing. But I'm sure we're gonna have the same issues that a lot of y'all having. Where are the people to work? Even with the money, it's hard to find people that are qualified and want to come work. And then finally, one thing we've been hearing a lot of is rural assistance. Rural Texas is kind of getting left behind in some places. It's hard to replace your 50-year-old water system when you've got the same population or less than you did 50 years ago when you put it in. So we're asking for funds for a rural water assistance fund for projects to help rural communities grow and maintain what they've got. And we're also asking for technical assistance funds. Some of these communities, when you have a city secretary, that's your only hired person in the city, it's kind of hard for them to run the city, keep the lights on, pay the bills, and then, plan for your capital improvement plan for your water and wastewater systems. It's just really hard to do. So I hope I fulfilled my duties of being a keynote speaker. Texas is big. We got a lot of big needs, a lot of big challenges, a lot of big opportunities. As long as if we continue to lead the state's efforts in securing water future for Texas, we need some help. Thank you for your time, your indulgence here today. Ms. Jackson would probably spoke an hour. I'm not that long. And I look forward to the rest of the summit. Some great comments here earlier today. Groundwater is fascinating to me. It's the occult, right, Mr. Ellis? I love that saying. The occult, it can't be managed. It can be managed. It just takes people and effort and time and volunteers and money. So thank y'all very much.